This is Pat Soundbites Unplugged. Unplugged, the podcast where all the artists go to tell it as it is. Careers, music, tours, and more. And here's your host, the man that refuses to eat squid, Pat Calamari.
Hey, live on Pat Soundbites Unplugged podcast, rocking the world and rocking a lot of shows at this place, Daryl's house. And I got this incredible gentleman over. I always do this wrong, Jed. He's a multi-talented, extremely talented. I've seen him do like Elvis. I've seen him do like Johnny Cash. But now he's doing Paul McCartney. It's called the McCartney Experience. It's coming to Daryl's this Saturday night, the 29th. Doors open at 5. Show starts at 8. And get your tickets today, darylshouseclub.com or 845-289-0185. Welcome the extremely, could I call him Paul McCartney or call him Jed Duvall? How are you, Jed?
I'm doing well, Pat. How are you doing today?
I am, well, we got a rocking thunderstorm going on, so I'm hoping we don't lose power. But thanks for your time. The pleasure is mine. I know you're going to rock Daryl's house. It's a beautiful venue. I know you've been doing this for quite a while. As I said, doing some research on you. Man, a little Elvis, a little Johnny Cash, a little Folsom Prison Blues. But what I always like to start out, Jed, is how did you find your love for music? What was the start? What gravitated you to music? Watching the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, mom and dad? Help me out.
My parents actually lived in England in the 1950s. And so when the Beatles came out, when I was very, very, very small, when the Beatles came out, it was one of those things that were British that my parents loved. And of course, I had my older sister and aunts who lived nearby me who loved the Beatles. And so I loved all sorts of music from television, music from musicals. My mom would play Broadway musicals. My dad would play country music. But, you know, I think the first real popular music I really gravitate towards were the Beatles.
Cool. Now, when you went to school, did you get involved with picking up an instrument or being in choir or any of that?
I did choir. Instruments cost money and lessons cost money, and we didn't have a lot of money. My parents did have me go for piano lessons when I was a kid, but I used to get beat up at the bus stop with my music. So I kind of stopped doing that. So it was something that I sort of picked up on my own. I saw an Elvis impersonator came to my school when I was 15, and I just was very enamored with him. And I picked up a record called Elvis's Sun Sessions, which was the early Elvis stuff. And I bought a guitar for about $45 and taught myself to play guitar and sing, and joined the army and was in a Elvis tribute band where I played Elvis. And they took us around to other bases, army bases. So that was a start. That was a start. I always liked music, but I was also always liked pretending to be other people.
Where did you always have the confidence to get in front of people and perform with no problem? A lot of people, public speaking, they freak out a little bit.
I've never had a real issue with that. Even when I was a little kid, I remember in 5th grade, we did A Christmas Carol, and I was Jacob Marley, and I just loved rattling the chains, and when people applauded, I loved it. So yeah, I've never really had a big issue with that.
Now it kind of falls back into the love of the Beatles, and I hear you. I was a couple of years old when the Ed Sullivan Show came out, but my family was always, my cousin especially. I know I have the original Meet the Beatles album, and it was always all about the Beatles. And I mean, come on, one of the greatest bands of all time. But
sure.
Yeah, I mean, cool. Now you do Paul McCartney. What made you decide to give that a shot after Elvis and a little Johnny Cash?
Well, I'd done those other guys, and it just seemed like there were so many Elvises, and to set yourself apart from the pack, you really had to look like Elvis. You really had to be Elvis if you wanted to set yourself apart from the thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And people were coming up to me often in the middle of a show and saying, "You look like Paul McCartney," which was a little strange because, we grew up, Paul McCartney was it. Paul McCartney was the epitome of good-looking, available bachelor guys. So for someone to come to me and say, "You look like Paul McCartney," that's how you're putting me on, You want money? I don't have any money,
What's the biggest challenge? The makeup, the wig? What is it like to play Halloween every other show and say, "I'm playing Paul McCartney tonight"?
It's a whole thing. It's playing the bass left-handed when I grew up playing a right-handed guitar. It's learning the piano songs. It's sitting and listening to interviews and trying to replicate the accent and the voice. Because that's sort of a pet peeve of mine when people just get a little lazy with the British accent and they sound more like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins than so it's the whole thing. And to be a little trite, it's when it all comes together, as it were, and you're up there and you feel that energy of Paul McCartney, and you are in front of people who love Paul McCartney, love the Beatles, or at least can stand it. And you'd be surprised how many people say, I'm not a big Beatles fan, but I like your show. And I just say, get out, leave.
Well, yeah, that was one of my questions about the left-handed guitar playing. If you're a righty, so obviously you got to learn the lefty and obviously the piano and stuff like that. Is there any song when you get on stage and you start singing these great, from what I understand, and I'll let you explain that, from the early Beatles to, Paul solo and Wings and all that, I believe you cover. Is there a special song or one or two songs that really embody, you go, okay, I'm in the element. I feel it.
You were talking about Meet the Beatles, and I still have my aunt. I sort of stole it from her, but I still have my aunt's Meet the Beatles album. And all my loving, every time I play that song, I can see myself 4 or 5 years old standing in front of a mirror, holding a tennis racket like it's bass guitar, and singing along with Paul. So yeah, that's a song that really takes me back. And then the later thing, Wing songs, when I was in junior high and high school, I hear a song like Band on the Run or Listen to What the Man Said, and it takes me back to riding my bicycle and collecting wacky packages or whatever I did when I was 12 years old, 13 years old,
I love Wings. I got to introduce actually Denny Lane at Daryl's house, Grammy Award winner, and got to spend time. I met Denny a bunch of times now, and I just spent hours with him just talking about what's it like to work with Paul.
Right.
What was it like to be the right-hand man and going through all that? It's a story in itself. So it's great that you're going to be on the stage at Daryl's house. And you're right. You're absolutely right. There's so many Elvis people out there. But when I can't think of many McCartney Experience, I've seen the Fab Four down in Broadway, New York City, a little Beatle thing. But to really zone in on just Paul, that's different. So I think you're on to your own path, which is awesome.
Well, that's great. I've seen some great Beatle bands. Britain's Finest out of California, of course, the aforementioned Fab Four, 1964, and Rain. I've gone to see them, and of course they put on a great show, and of course they're playing great songs. But personally, for me, I walk away saying, oh, I wish I could have heard some Wings. I wish I could have heard something from Give My Regards to Broad Street, or something from the 80s or even the 2000s. That would be a lot of fun. And I think that was the catalyst for me starting this act. And there are a few guys out there that do Beatles and just a Paul show, but they're few and far between. And so I hope we cover an area that some people are missing out on.
I think it's also good, Jed, that you're doing it in intimate clubs, that you're not at the 100,000 seat stadium, even though that would be great, like
Yeah.
a Paul show, but you're right there where people could really take it all in. And I'm sure you feel the energy, because who doesn't know 90% of Paul's songs? I mean, or the Beatles songs. I mean, that they're singing back to you. I mean, I get goosebumps just thinking about it.
Right. And you know, it's not only that's what I miss when I go to a Paul McCartney show. I know McCartney's up there somewhere. He's
Right.
far away. But I like the fact that our show brings that intimacy, and I tell some stories, and I tell a little bit of trivia about some songs and a bit of anecdotes, and you know, we have some sing-alongs, and so it's very involved. The audience is very involved. They're not sitting 300 yards away from me. They're sitting. I literally spit on them, and I apologize ahead of time if I'm spitting you on Saturday. But I'm right there, and they're right there with me, and so it's a very, they feed off me, I feed off them, circular sort of energy going on.
Well, you're so close to them at Daryl's house, you can just grab a French fry when you bend down to say hello to them, or grab a sip, because it's gonna be a rocking show. All the reserved table seating is all sold out, so it's now down to general admission, and I'm sure it's gonna sell out, because, like I said, there's a lot of tribute bands that play at Daryl's, and they keep coming back for more. But this is, I want to say, if not the first one, so I know it's going to be an amazing night. What's your favorite song? What's your favorite Beatles song or favorite Paul McCartney song to sing?
Let's see.
Probably a million of them.
I mean, all of them running through my head. I always love when I'm playing a ballad or something slow, and then I come back with something that punches you. You know, we've been doing Coming Up from the later Wings, early Paul solo career. And that always gets people up and dancing around, or you know, a song like Can't Buy Me Love. I don't know why. And you know, I just counted off 1, 2, 3, 4. God buy me love, and you know, you see the people who are there, especially to hear the Beatles, their whole face lights up, and it takes them a minute, but all of a sudden they're singing along with me, and you know, when we do Hey Jude, and we get
boy,
along with the na-na-nas, and it's fun. You know, it's you're not just sitting there watching, you're part of the show too.
You know, Jed, there's something about music. I say it all the time. You go into a club, you go to a show with, you know, a bunch of strangers that you have no idea. The world is a mess at times. But when you go to a live show and you know all the music, and you're singing along and you're high-fiving, and for an hour and a half or almost 2 hours or so, you're on cloud nine. You forget all your worries and any of that. And there's something about music that does that for folks like myself.
And you walk into a room like that, and you could see it. You can see people who are strangers, and by the time they leave, you know, you see them exchanging phone numbers and saying, hope to see you again. And you feel like you've made, personally, when I feel like I made that happen, you know, you talk about the terrible things in the world, and if I could help people come together and see their neighbors and be friends and have a good time together, then I feel like I'm doing something towards, it sounds very presumptuous, towards making the world a better place.
Absolutely. Do you see a young audience too, Jed? Do you see,
yes,
besides dinosaurs like me?
You know, it's funny. I have people say, well, you know, we're going to be hitting the 45 to 65 year olds, and I understand why a marketer would want to do that. But I've run into so many people. I mean, I signed a 16-year-old girl's arm 2 weeks ago. I mean, and you know, 20-year-olds who tell me how much they love the Beatles and how much they love Paul McCartney. Toddlers, their grandparents will come up to me and say sing for them, and they'll sing I want to hold your hand or something like that. And it just makes me feel very good that I'm helping to carry on such a great volume of music.
Exactly. The catalog of the history and the catalog of the incredible songs. And I mean, you think about the songwriting of Lennon and McCartney. I mean, how that comes out is just crazy. I mean, I'm blessed to interview a lot of artists like yourself. And I go, could I write a song? And they go, sure, you could. I don't know if it's going to be a hit, but you could. And the stories of how these songs, happen in like 5 minutes, they think of a saying or something happened, and before you know it, they get on the piano or grab a guitar and it's done. But the magnitude of the catalog of Paul McCartney is just, oh my goodness. I mean, we know all the songs. So yeah, to be in your spot is got to be, you got to walk off that stage with the biggest smile. And your band, tell me about your band, Jed. They gotta love the Beatles as much as you do, right?
They do. And I never had a harder working crew behind me. Playing at Daryl's would be my old dear friend Kevin Driscoll on guitar and bass. We have Tim Bracken on drums, Don Jakowski, just a wizard on the keyboards, and Chris Marks on lead guitar. So I feel completely blessed to have such a crew playing with me.
Have you got a chance to play in the UK at all?
No, but I tell you what I did do. I went to Paul McCartney's house on tour, and I stood in the living room where he and John Lennon wrote so many songs, and there was a photo up right where I was standing of them writing. She was just 17, and that one. Can't even think of it right now. And they let me play the piano that was in the living room. It was one of the most surreal moments of my life, sitting in Paul McCartney's living room where he lived till he was 23 years old, playing the piano in there. So you can almost feel the energy from that. And we did go to the Cavern Club, and we saw a very good tribute band there. So yeah, walking around Liverpool, walking in the footsteps of the greats, it's very humbling and it's very inspiring.
And I saw her standing there, I think is the track here, right?
It's funny that the way that a song title will pop out of your mind, and even though you know every word to it.
There's a rock band, if you have heard, is Tesla. They've been around since the 80s. And Brian Wheat, the bass player, he's a diehard Beatle fan. And Tesla actually recorded in Abbey Road Studios and did like a live Facebook thing. And Brian said you could just feel it. It was just something. It was crazy. It was insane. It was a bucket list. And then actually record an album from Abbey Road as some of their, and then threw a couple of Beatles songs in there. He says it's a dream come true.
I would imagine. I really would. Okay, now I've got a new bucket list.
You got to walk the street. You got to go to Abbey Road, and you got to do it. You got to do a Beatles song with the guys, and make sure somebody records it.
Now we did go to Abbey Road, got a picture taken crossing the street, but you have to run. They're not stopping for you unless you're famous. You have to really trot across that.
My friend told me that, and he did it like 5 times before somebody could really get a good picture. He says they don't want to. They just, oh, another one of these. No. They just move. It's like New York City crazy.
Yep.
What would you say is the hardest song that you had to learn out of this massive catalog of great hits?
I'll tell you, to sing along with the song Day Tripper and to play the bass line, which is not the most difficult bass line in the world, but it doesn't really follow the melody of the voice. Okay. So you have to sort of disconnect your mind from what you're playing on the bass as you're singing the song. So that, and Silly Love Songs is almost the same way, but not quite as difficult as Day Tripper. Whenever I see Day Tripper on the set list, I said, "Oh, I'm going to be practicing that riff for days and days in my sleep until I get it right."
Speaking of the bass, do you play with a Rickenbacker or Hofner, whatever Paul had? I want to say
I play a Hofner.
Okay.
I used to have a Rickenbacker, and I found myself playing the Hofner so much, and people, you and I know that Paul McCartney during the 70s almost always played a Rickenbacker. But most people who are familiar, not experts, but familiar with Paul, are usually disappointed if I pull out the Rick. And so I started playing Hofner almost exclusively. And now that's all I play on stage is Hofner.
Well, we are looking forward to it, Jed. Any last words to tell our viewers, our listeners, to fasten your seatbelts for an incredible Beatles night and a night of Paul McCartney?
And please, please, please go and get tickets as soon as you can. It would break my heart if someone said, "Oh, I really want to see you," and you were sold out. And, we don't know when we'll be back again. We hope very soon, but we don't know. So please get your tickets. And if you have tickets, get ready to sing along. Don't sit in the corner and keep to yourself. You're with a lot of friends, and I'm your friend.
There you go. Get your ticket today, Daryl'sHouseClub.com, 845-289-0185. I can't get the smile off my face. I got to get down there. The door opens at 5. Jed and the band get on stage. Paul gets on stage at 8 o'clock. Put on your dancing shoes. Get ready to sing. Get ready to dance. It is going to be a party and a half, and I can't wait. Jed, thank you so much for your time. And you can go to, I want to say, the McCartney Experience website, Facebook, and YouTube. Go to the YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all that, because we live in a social media world. So by all means, the more likes, it's all about the numbers, right, Jed?
All about the numbers. McCartney Experience.com.
Yeah. Get your tickets today. Sell that thing out. Can't wait for Saturday night. Jed, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Pat. Looking forward to seeing you.
It doesn't get any better than this McCartney Experience. This amazing, talented musician, Jed Duvall, gonna rock the house at Daryl's house. Get your tickets today.